Good evening and welcome to this webinar on working with the science of behaviour to train your donkeys and mules. I want to get straight into it. This webinar really starts to build on all the other webinars that we've done. In fact, this is kind of the wrong way around. This is the foundation webinar that maybe we should have put in first. And then we will use the other webinars to build on from this one, really. But this is about the science of behavior. It's quite general because rather than being a specific deal with feet or a nervous animal. So you're going to take the science, you're going to take all the things we'll share on this, take it to the next webinar about your nervous donkey, take it to the webinar about feet or the general problems, vet handling. Use the principles in here to enhance those other areas as we go through. And what I've labeled here is this practical application of the science of behavior and learning to training donkeys and mules. I don't want to make it too sciencey. It is about the science of behavior, but I want to make sure the practical application is in there so that everybody's got that and that you're all comfortable with those aspects. So I'm presuming everybody can see nicely that screen. Just somebody, Kathy from Ireland, just check you're still awake. Give me a yes if you can see that, so that I can check we're all together. Fantastic. Okay, Charlotte, lovely, great. So what I want to show you, I want to show you the 4 challenges of working with behavior. And I think over the years, what I've seen is kind of 4 key things that get in the way of us using the science of behavior. So I wanted to just mention those first. The one thing you must do before you start training, if you're going to use the science of behavior, the 6 steps to working with equine behavior. Essentially, you know, equine behavior is a huge topic. You know, I scared myself putting all this together, thinking, what do I leave in? What do I put out? It's a huge topic. You know, we run whole days on these subjects. And those are going to be coming up online in our new Donkey Academy. We're working on that right now. We're using all this time when we can't be out traveling and doing things to build the Donkey Academy. So you're going to see that coming up and a whole day's course online available to cover this sort of material. So again, we're touching on this and hoping to build for you some of the aspects that are really going to make a difference. How to avoid the most common mistake in training. Yep, we're going to try and show you that. The 4 quadrants of learning. So we're going to talk a little bit about positive and negative reinforcement. And how do you know when I need help? The one thing that does frustrate me a great deal is that people don't ask for help early enough. And maybe that's because they're not aware that we can help. Maybe, I don't know why. But we tend to wait until there's a real problem before just getting a bit of help. So that's something to bear in mind as we work through all of this. So let's kick off with the 4 challenges of working with behavior. Now, the first one I've experienced is everyone's a behaviorist. And the reason for that is everybody's working with behavior every day. You're working with family behavior, children's behavior, in whatever way, shape or form that comes. You know, we're working with our animals' behavior. We're working with the behavior of other drivers. We're constantly working with behavior all day. And that's quite a challenge, really, for everybody. That is just, where did we learn about behavior? From our parents, maybe some at school. Unless you've deliberately gone and studied it, you know, behavior is something that's in all our lives. You know, our work colleagues, I love those picture where these two look a little bit like they shouldn't be in that sort of relationship at work, and this guy at the background, I don't know what's going on, but it's behavior. We're all surrounded by behavior. So everybody's a behaviorist. We come with a certain amount of baggage, and sometimes when we don't understand the science of behavior, it's difficult to empty out some of the previous knowledge, some of the things that we think we know, and just set them aside to allow some new knowledge in. And that's one of the hardest things that I find about working with behaviors is emptying people's beliefs about behavior so that you can then move forward. And it's really key to trying to allow an opportunity for new learning to go in. So people don't really think about the fact that they're a behaviorist. if we did a course on teeth or feet, most people aren't going to go away and do them, but everybody's going to go and work with behavior. So whether you realize it or not, you're a behaviorist already. Number two, the misunderstanding of the true nature of the species. This is something that I'm going to talk about in more detail, because I think it's crucial to making a really good start and one of the keys to working with behavior. But, you know, classic donkey mistaken as a small horse with big ears. That changes what we're going to do with them. It doesn't matter whether you're working with dogs or cats, it's understanding that true nature of that animal. If you're working with horses, you know, understanding what having a flight mechanism really means. Number three is people blame the animal. I don't know why that says two, should say three. People blame the animal. It's really noticeable to me. He's naughty, he's this, she's that. We tend to blame the animal a great deal. And this picture is really important. This is going to come back up. This animal was getting blamed for all sorts of bad behavior. And I want you to notice the length of the stick here, because that tells you what might be involved. Humans are quick learners, and they'd figured out that if they got too close, there was going to be a problem. And so we tend to see when people blame the animal, he's a bit moody, he's a bit of a git, whatever it might be, we absolve ourselves of the responsibility of solving the problem. We don't mean to, but if the problem is the animals, if it's there deliberately doing something, there's no reason for us to try and find a way to solve it. They're just being uncomfortable, naughty, whatever incorrect terminology. And so we want to try and avoid blaming the animal for their behavior. And I'll talk a little bit about how we do that. In fact, let's do this now. In the chat box, what sort of language might people use if they were blaming the animal? What would you hear if somebody was blaming the animal? What sort of examples might you hear, do you think? You know, give me some examples. Stubborn, yeah, so that would be a label. He knows that it's wrong. Yeah, he's really headstrong. I can't catch. Yeah, stubborn, naughty. Yeah, lazy. Good. Yeah, I'm liking some of these. I'm not even going to repeat that, Liz. But yeah, she is moody. Yeah, mean, ignorant. So there's lots of individual labels here that might come up if people were blaming the animal. It might also be about them kind of putting on to the animal the responsibility. You know, I've tried everything, but he doesn't change. Taking the mickey, yeah. People are shouting, yes, they're raising their voice. Stupid, yeah, we haven't bonded. Yeah, okay, so you're all on the right page, brilliant. But how does that affect how you think about the donkey's behavior issues? If someone's labeling the donkey as having the problem, what do you think that's going to do for how they work or how they think about those issues? Any ideas? You can stick them in the chat box. The donkey must change for me. Love that, Steve. Yeah, that's good. Put a human emphasis on the problem. Blame is then on the animal. Worse still, you have to be dominant or get out. Yeah, okay. So you guys are all on fire about this. Yeah, I love these comments. Brilliant. Yeah. Negative relationship. Why is he doing it? People taking it personally. Basically, what you've all hit on is the fact that if you're going to label the behavior in this blaming way, you're going to spiral downwards. It's very difficult to get out of that negative spiral if you start labeling the animal's behavior and blaming them in that way. Your higher emotions send a negative emotion to the donkey. Yeah, it all spirals downwards. The interaction between the two, you blame the animal, it becomes negative. They want to spend less time with you. Brilliant. Okay, let's just leave this on a positive. If we were using the correct language, how might we discuss the donkey's behavior? The thing that we want to encourage is not labeling, but describing what you see. We use the say what you see principle. You know, we can use positive language. It's still kind of labeling, but just, you know, he ran across the field and spun around and kicked 3 times. He doesn't walk on a Tuesday when it's wet and there's a full moon. Whatever the behavior is, we can actually describe the behavior as what we are seeing. That say what you see principles becomes particularly objective. It allows other people to be able to understand what's going on. Yep, and you guys are on this again. When feet are touched, he kicks out. Yeah, we can be more specific. How many times does he kick out? Is it only the front or back feet? You know, fearful behavior. Yeah, again, you know, we have to be aware, Nikki, of the fearful behavior. Yes, he's fearful, and that adds us probably to be more sympathetic. But what do we actually see? He moves away when we approach. Because fearful behavior can also be a donkey that turns and threatens to kick us. So the say what you see principle is a good way of trying to avoid the labeling that might go on and blaming the animal. Runs up and snaps when food is present. What, like snaps in 2? No, I'm being pedantic, but yeah, I get what you mean. You're getting closer to it. Use the say what you see principle. Number 4 here is no one's got time. You know, I've heard this all over the world. People always, I don't have time, you know. And this might come out in how soon can I? It's taking so long to pick up his feet. Perhaps you can't be fixed. You know, there's lots of time pressure on people to get to the goal because the farrier's coming next week, or he's already got to a certain age, or I don't have much time. And, you know, I've had lots of examples in my career when actually working with an animal, you know, people say they don't have time to do it, but they'll have time to spend an hour catching the animal. When you think, well, that was, you know, 6-10 minute sessions spread over a couple of weeks, you might well fix the behavior for the rest of the animal's life. So we get into this false economy. And I think it's just important to remember time is a perception. What people often mean is it's not about time, it's about priority. It's not high enough priority for me to make it. Because if it's a high priority for you, you will make the time to fix the problem and to work with it. And that's not about finding an hour every day. The Science of Behaviour will tell you, you don't need to find an hour every day. You need to do the right things consistently through the day in your general interactions, and you need to spend a few minutes of quality time doing some really good training. And those few minutes are much more powerful than doing an hour's session. So actually working in this way fits much better into people's lives. So those are the 4 things that we want to kind of avoid that frees us up to use the science of behavior. So quick question, as you're all there and you're on the quick fire button on your chat box, what is the one thing you must do before you start training? Anybody got any ideas? I'll give you points for this one. No harm. Yeah, look at the donkey's behavior. There's some great answers, and you know, in truth, let's have a line along the top of all things that you could start. You know, get in the right frame of mind, observe the donkey, have a goal. Yeah, know where you're going. All of these things are really important. Let me tell you about this donkey while you're writing those things up. This donkey here was in Kenya, and this story was conveyed to us by a couple of our staff who made part of a scholarship to go and work and explore that part of the country. And they saw this donkey who was behaving strangely and being hit with this long pipe. And it didn't really make much sense of what was going on. So they kind of wandered across, as you would do, and asked some questions. This poor donkey was labeled as being difficult and naughty, and they had to use this stick to hit it to get it to do, because otherwise it would kick them. On just a tiny bit of inspection, it turned out that this donkey was actually blind. It was completely blind. So the reason it was doing what it was doing was because it was so incredibly terrified of everything that was going on, it became defensive, because of its lack of eyesight. So, you know, for me as a behaviorist, the one thing you have to do before you start training is make sure there are no physical or mental medical issues, blindness, you know, liver problems, underlying hyperlipemias, or laminitis, or those sorts of things. It's the first thing anybody who really is working with behavior will make sure is not the cause of behavior. There is no point trying to do training if pain is the issue. You know, and it's easy when we get a donkey like this to go, oh yes, I can see it's in pain, but it's those subtle behavior changes that you all know about. Eliminate pain, medical conditions before you do anything in the environment. And certainly, secondly to that, I'd say make sure your environment is not causing the problem. So, you know, a donkey that's stressed because its companions are picking on it, because it doesn't have enough turnout, because it's not got any social interaction, because its mental stimulation is down, that's not going to be fixed by training and applying the science of behavior. It's going to be fixed by improving the environment. So go for pain, make sure that's not an issue, make sure there are no medical conditions, eyesight, those have been sorted out and confirmed by a vet, and then make sure that the environment is right. Now, if you're just doing ordinary training, you're going to go, Ben, do I need to get a vet? You need to have a pretty good idea before you start training that there isn't going to be any physical reasons your donkey can't do what it's supposed to be doing. And if they've got any indication that there may be something wrong, get it checked out. There's a little behavior mix that I wanted to get you to think about when we're talking about the science of behavior. Who you are, or your attitude. Now, this both covers an overall who you are and who you are today and who you are in this 10 minutes that we're working with our donkey, all affected by lots of different factors. When we combine this with the method or process that you're using, say the science of behavior against a different type of training, what you'll see is that will ultimately affect the application. And this is one of the reasons we need to come back to not blaming the animal. You know, we have to be very aware that if my mood has changed, even if I'm still using the same process or method as yesterday, the application is going to be different. If I'm still lovely and calm and patient, but I've changed my method, then the application is going to be different. And the donkey is constantly having to deal with those changes of application. And all of this comes into the environment in which the donkey has been kept. So when we're working with behavior and the science of behavior, you know, when I'm working with someone who's got the behavior issue for that animal, we are thinking about the whole environment. What's in that environment might affect the behavior. Who's the person that's in the environment? What's their attitude? What's their level of confidence? What's the method and process, and how does that make the application? These are all factors that feed into the behavioral mix. So, you know, if you've got a behavioral issue, are your confidence, lack of confidence, your labeling, is your end goaling because you're trying to get it done too quickly? Are any of those things influencing the application of the method? Or maybe your application of the method just isn't quite as right because we haven't done enough learning, or you're new to donkeys. These are all fine things. It's not necessarily blaming yourself, but it's certainly not about just putting the responsibility on the donkey. There are some other elements that I wanted to mention here that I'm not going to go into in huge detail tonight because it just simply isn't time. But I wanted to say timing. Timing is your communication. You have to get your timing right. So whatever you do when we're talking about our step 3 in a moment, communication, it is your timing. And to get your timing right, you have to be fully present. You have to be able to concentrate fully on that animal in that moment. You can't be thinking about what you're going to do later, what you're going to did yesterday, the argument you just had, or what's for tea, because you're not present and your timing will be affected. So in the moments that you choose to work with your donkey, be fully aware that will improve the timing of your interaction, because your timing is your communication. It's effectively, whatever you're doing, how you tell the animal what are the consequences for its behavior. And the better your timing, the better the communication. if you do have a behavior problem, one of the rules I would have is don't go to the problem to fix the problem. So often, you know, I've got a problem with feet. Let's try and pick up the foot. My donkey doesn't load. Let's try and make it load. It doesn't like leading. Right. Okay, let's lead it. We are going to end up in so many problems like that. We're going to need to step back, look at the cause of the behavior, begin to undermine some of those things. And that brings us into remember why donkeys do what they do. If you've been with me before, you may have seen this photograph. But we've got all of these things that could be causing a change in behavior or affecting the donkey's behavior. And if we don't take them into consideration, we could be working on the wrong thing. So we could be trying to, for instance, a question about vets came up earlier, could be trying to get them used to having a torch shine in their eyes and being touched. That could all be fine. But if it's smell that's causing the problem, that's what we need to work with. And we will always be referring back to this. You know, evolution is the donkey, the species, and the behavior. We'll talk about that in a moment. The individual distinctiveness, and we'll see that. How you are, your moods, you know, everything that goes in, and it's changing constantly. And that's why donkey's behavior can't be constant, because all of this is moving all of the time. And it's really important that you always just have that in the back of your head whenever you're coming up against training. You know, have they just had a really bad, rainy, cold, wet night, and actually they're not really going to concentrate because they haven't had enough sleep? Is it 2 o'clock in the middle of the day and they're in their sleepy kind of dozy time and you want to do a leading lesson? That's a really good time to do a standing still lesson, not a great time to do a leading lesson. So just be thinking about these kind of aspects as we go through behavior. Top tip number 1. Okay, so you get these for absolute free. I want you to just bear in mind, I'm not being rude, but this is what we need to do. We need to shut up and listen to our animals. They are communicating with us. If we can stop and watch them. Video is great for this. Get some video of the behavior so you can play it back when you're not trying to be involved in it. Have someone else video when you're not around. Set up a camera, whatever you can imagine to do. Listen to that animal's behavior. When we're making judgments, when we're trying to label behavior, we're not really listening. And so my first tip is always shut up and listen to the animal. If you're working with owners and other people, really listen to the owner as to what they're going to say. You're going to hear a huge amount from them. 6 key steps to working with the science of behavior. Now, there are lots of things we could learn about the science of behavior. Like I said, you know, we could talk about it all night. But what I found over the years that I've been doing this, these 6 things are the most common problems that I find when I'm working with people and their animals. These are the things that work on the Pareto principle, which is the 80-20 rule. This probably makes up 20% of all the things you could possibly do. But if you do them well, you will see an 80% improvement in your communication and your donkey's behavior. So it is much easier to focus on these 6 things and improve them than it is to try and figure out everything that goes on in behavior. You know, I'll give you some other resources that you can look at and you can start to delve deeper, but try to get these 6 things right. Some of them you'll already be on and go, yeah, I can do that. I know that, which is fantastic. Others you might need to just tweak a little bit and get better and pay attention to. Others you might think, I've never even thought of that. It's part of the journey, but concentrate on these 6 steps. So let's have a look at them. Working with the true nature of the species. And donkeys are a great example of this. You know, let's label them as a small horse with big ears and wonder why they don't behave like a horse. They're so different. Now, let's hope this bit of video plays for you. I hope you can see that. It may be a little bit jerky, but you can see that if this was a horse mare, she'd be off and running by now. And she's actually defending. When she leaves, it's a foal that leads her away. And do you think she looks particularly worried or upset? Whenever I show this video in normal circumstances, people tell me, no, she doesn't look that upset. And for me, that is the key difference for donkey behavior. She stood her ground. She didn't just gallop off like if it was a horse. And when she left, she didn't look that scared, even though I suspect she was. And that subtle difference is really important. The other aspect here is if you've got two donkeys that like to play aggressively, this may look like some nice aggressive play, which possibly it is. Does this look like aggressive play? I think we might have gone a little bit past the borders of some play of any description. And their true nature is that any donkey could do that to us. That's the worrying thing. Any donkey has the strength to do that. If they did not want us to work with them, we would not be able to. They could take us out in a split second. I have only ever met two equines that were truly aggressive towards people, and both have been turned that way by people. Yes, a donkey will kick out defensively. Yes, a donkey might bite, but that really isn't true aggression. You can see their true nature. Their nature is to actually be submissive. It is to avoid confrontation. It is to communicate. So the tail swishes, the ear pinning, the kick threats, the bite threats are all ways to avoid confrontation. Recognizing that this is their true nature is really important, because it's on the same par as the labeling behavior and blaming the animal. They have that capacity to truly level us, yet we can train them and lead them around. They're adaptable, they are very good at learning, and yet they don't use their strength against us. We're also working with this pyramid of the individual behavior. So species behavior, donkey, horse, dog. Breed behavior, so we've got our mammoth jack compared to our miniature jack, our cob versus our thoroughbred, maybe our spaniel versus a greyhound. They've got different behavior. Sometimes people just work at a species level. It's a donkey. Some people get smart and start working at a breed behavior. Mammoth jacks require you to work differently from miniature donkeys. Cobs maybe need you to work a little bit differently to thoroughbreds, and they certainly have different needs. But this individual behavior, what's his learning style? What's age appropriate for this particular donkey? What about previous history? What about all those other things I showed you on that map? All of those make up the individual animal and their characteristics and learning style. And you want to have all three of these. You've got two donkeys. They might both be donkeys. They might be the same breed, but they will not be the same individual. And so it's important to look at each animal's individual behavior when you're doing an assessment, when you're thinking about how you're going to train. You're thinking about the reasons for behavior and beginning to look at the characteristics of that individual animal. And this is my imaginary horse body language fear scale, just to really highlight the differences for donkeys and horses. Most of you are good, knowledgeable donkey people, so you're going to totally get this. But essentially what we have is this imaginary chart that I've created here that starts off down at calm and relaxed, goes through worried and up to panic. Because of the horse's evolutionary ancestry, when you produce a predator or something scary, it's really easy to see when a horse is terrified. On the same scale, a donkey comes in somewhere around worried. Right? Just because we've put him on this scale, we've misread the body language. What happens is the donkey should have his own scale. He's actually at panic level. But because we've put him on the horse scale, we misread the language. So what happens a lot for donkeys is we put them on the imaginary horse body language scale, because we've seen that, we've seen movies, we've seen racehorses. We put the donkey on the same scale, we misread their body language. The donkey, take a horse to something scary and they're like, oh, I can't do that. And it's easy to see that they are fearful because of their behavior. You take a donkey to the same thing at the same level of fear, that donkey kind of goes, a bit worried. You're like, what? come on, let's go. The donkey's like, no, I can't do that. And you're kind of like, come on, and they kind of lean back, and they've got that long neck, and no, I definitely can't do that. And so, the donkey doesn't look terrified, he doesn't look really worried, but he's not doing what you want to. And that's where the definition of stubborn ends up coming from, is this misunderstanding of the difference of the true nature of the animal. So whichever animal you're working with, you've got to understand its true nature, whether it's a mule, which again is a blend of horse and donkey. So you've got your horse behavior. If the mule hasn't been trained from day one, you might well get a lot of the horse flightiness, the running around. It's learned that from its mother. You finally catch it, you get a halter on, and it may well adopt its stoic donkey father's behavior of being very quiet, very calm, trying self-preservation. Push it too far, frighten it, it's going to leap up, leap out, and panic and try and get away and go back to being a horse. And they sort of change their behavior on a wave, where a horse is going to behave like a horse and a donkey behaves like a donkey. And that mixture of behavior often confuses people for a mule. One minute they think it's doing really well and it's fine, and then it panics and people are like, oh, he's just being, and we're just labeling and going back to blaming the animal again. Please remember, everything that we're doing, we're working at the mule standard. So it's not like there's something different we have to do with mules. We just have to do all of this stuff correctly for mules and donkeys and horses. We're not taking horse behavior and training methods and applying them to donkeys. We can go the other way, in my opinion. We can take mule behavior, donkey behavior, and apply it to horses, and horses get a lot better deal. If you can learn to read donkey body language, reading horse body language is so much easier. Vicky asked, there are hinnies the same wave as a mule? Yeah, they can be, but because they've spent the first 6 months of their lives with a more stoic donkey father, mother, sorry, they tend to be a little bit calmer. They look more pony-like, but they tend not to have so much of the wave of changes that the mule will do. Step 2. Understand operant conditioning. I said there's only 6 steps, but I mean, communicate effectively, consistently, and with perfect timing. I'm not asking too much, I guess. But this is really important. This is our communication. There is a couple of ways that we can look at this associative learning, and that's what I want to look at tonight. There are lots of different ways of learning, but this is about associating the learning to different environment situations. We've got classical conditioning, which is our Pavlovian conditioning, and this is where an animal pairs a neutral stimulus. So head collar doesn't mean anything to an animal until you start pairing it with pleasant or unpleasant experiences. You only catch your donkey for the vet, the farrier, the dentist. No matter how good they are, those often are not the most pleasant of experiences. And so pretty soon the donkey sees the head collar and starts not to want to be caught. So, those of you who've got a catching issue, you need to check that there's no cues or signals that kind of mean being caught is something negative. It's the classic stuff from Pavlov, ringing his bell and giving meat powder and drooling dogs and all those sorts of things. It's about this pairing of behavior. It only affects reflex actions. So it's heart rate, it's sweating, it's chemical releases in the body. It's things the animal doesn't think about. So the release of fear chemicals, the preparedness for fight or flight, those are reflex actions. So that's our classical conditioning. I'm not going to stay a lot on that tonight because I want to focus a little bit on our operant conditioning, or instrumental learning, you might know it as. Operant conditioning is there because the animal operates on its environment. It does things to change its environment or the results of the environment. So we've got some areas now. We need to understand all of these 3. I am not advocating the use of punishment, but we need to understand what punishment is so that you can check whether you're using it. If you want to use punishment, provided you don't work at the donkey sanctuary, we don't use punishment if we possibly can within the sanctuary. If you want to use it outside, that's your choice, but use it correctly. As a behaviorist, it's not my job to tell you what you should or shouldn't use, but it is my job to explain how it works and make sure that you are correct. So anything that the animal considers negative, it's the animal's consideration. It's really important with all of this is that you have to think from the animal's point of view. So we could think about being touched and having scratches as being really positive, unless of course you are a very nervous animal or you've never been touched by a human, in which case being touched is not a positive experience, not by a human at least. So these things change, and I think this is the biggest challenge for understanding operant conditioning and what the communication is with your animal, is understanding how the animal perceives the things that we do, not our wishful thinking or presumption of what might happen. We've got positive reinforcement, anything that will increase the likelihood of the behavior. So anything, the likelihood, notice it doesn't definitely change things. And I often talk to people about this with a crazy example of, you know, an animal or yourselves. If you think of a fear or phobia that you have, depending on the size of that fear or phobia, if you're thinking about your heights or your spiders, you know, how much would I have to pay you, presuming that money was positive for you, how much would I have to pay you to do that scary thing, to hold a spider, to hang over the top of a 100-foot tall building, or you know, climb into a coffin if you're claustrophobic, whatever it is. You know, and I can't go to a donkey and go, look, here's the world's biggest carrot if you just pick up your feet or get in this trailer. We have to break what we ask down into small enough steps to be able to reward small bits of behavior to increase the likelihood that they will happen again. So I could maybe give you £1 to talk about spiders, or to look at a picture of a spider, or to stand in a large room. That might be the start of our training program with positive reinforcement. People often ask me, you know, positive reinforcement, how's that going to stop a donkey that's bolting off? Well, it's not. The donkey's not going to stop in the middle of a full bolting down the field as it drags you water skiing behind it and think, oh, I wonder if I can get a carrot. Hang on a minute, let me have a look. It's not going to happen. But what positive reinforcement will do is increase the likelihood that that donkey won't bolt at all. So we have to think differently. We have to use these things slightly differently to be able to reward a behavior. But again, you know, I've been lucky enough to work with Mustangs, and a piece of carrot is not a reward. So I don't understand what a piece of carrot is off the ranges. You know, can they learn? Yes. But to start with, it's not a reward. Chocolate's not a reward if you're on a diet. Some of you are thinking, oh, yes, it is, Ben. But get my point. This is all about understanding the animal's perception. We will then have the one that confuses a lot of people: negative reinforcement. And I'm going to show you the quadrants and help sort of try and straighten this out for you a little bit. The stopping or cessation of a negative stimulus. Really important, the stopping or cessation of a negative stimulus. So this is the release of pressure. It's not a reward. You don't reward the animal by taking the pressure off. A reward is positive reinforcement. It does something different. Negative reinforcement, taking something negative away that increases the likelihood of the behavior happening again. So your donkey steps forward, it walks alongside it, you give it a carrot, that's positive reinforcement. You've added a carrot to the situation. You've increased the likelihood of that donkey walking alongside you. You give a little tug on the lead rope, there's some pressure, a negative stimulus on the head collar, the animal steps forward, you release the pressure. That release of pressure is negative reinforcement. You're telling the animal that if I do this and you step forward, the pressure will come off. The next time that it feels the pressure, the animal knows what to offer, hopefully stepping forward to release the pressure. Now, these things aren't all perfect. They will work against you as well. You're stroking your donkey and you're trying to get to his leg and you reach your hand down, he kicks out and you pull your hand off. That's negative reinforcement. You've taken something away, and the donkey's learned that kicking gets rid of something that's unpleasant. Your donkey walks up to you, gives you a little nip on the arm. You go, oh, bad boy, that's naughty, don't do that. And you stroke the donkey goes, cool, I nip you, I get attention. Positive reinforcement. The classic one people do for this one is a donkey that's in their face or nibbling a little bit. They put the hand on and they push the animal head away. Now, we think we're telling them off, but actually what you're doing is almost certainly using positive reinforcement for nibbling because they got attention for it. You've touched them on the face. Yes. Oh, not quite. So the donkey does it again. take the head collar, move it away, don't touch the animal in those circumstances. So it's the animal's perception, not your intention. Again, this is where video is really useful. This is where having someone watch you and go, are you aware that? This is your timing. The communication is really important here, and how you time your positive reinforcement or your negative reinforcement. If you've got any questions about these, just pop them in the chat box, because I appreciate, for some of you, this might be first time you've come across this. For others, it's a top up. I appreciate that. A way to kind of remember this is that I've created this little sort of graph here for you. Reinforcement increases behavior, punishment stops behavior. And again, we could do a whole hour session on just understanding these principles, but think of the up arrow increasing the likelihood of the behavior being repeated, and the down arrow is decreasing the likelihood of behavior being repeated. And then what we think about is, have we added something like food or scratches or shouting or physical pain or punishment? Have we removed something such as pressure, a negative stimulus, something the animal wanted? And if we go through that process, what we can do is come up with what the animal perceived our communication to be. So we've used some praise, and that means we've added something, some scratches, the behavior increases. We can be pretty sure we've used positive reinforcement. We've taken something away. We've taken away that pressure, but the behavior of leading has increased. We've got the donkey to stand still with our hand on its leg. It stood calm. We've taken our hand away. The next time we go down, it stands still a little bit longer. We're pretty sure we're using negative reinforcement. If we go down into these two here, I don't want to confuse people. I'm not at this stage trying to teach positive punishment, and negative punishment confuses people. Don't think of these things as good and bad. It's not about whether this is positive reinforcement is good reinforcement and this is bad reinforcement. It's simply about the addition or taking away. Think of it like a math sum. Have I added something? Have I taken it away? I've added something that's positive. If I've taken something away, it's negative. It's not to do whether it's good or bad. Get rid of those thoughts. It makes it easier to understand. Positive punishment, I have just added something that decreases the likelihood of the behavior being repeated. There are lots of elements that have to go together to make this happen. Lots of people say, does punishment work? Yes, in the science lab. Effectively, punishment as a method of training, when everything can be controlled, it can stop behavior. You have to do it big enough. You have to do it with the right timing. You have to do it with the right motivation. There are a number of factors that are involved, but it has some fallout as well. It has some side effects on the relationship. It can affect other behaviors. It can cause all sorts of problems with not wanting to offer behavior and learning. Think about yourself if you've been punished for stuff. You know, most people can remember a time when they've been punished and they may think it's unjust, or they've stuck with it since they were a child. Whether it was right or wrong, you know, we've got hang-ups because we've been punished at some point in our lives. If the timing's right, if the behavior is small enough, if the punishment's big enough, it can stop a behavior, but that's all it does. It doesn't tell the animal what to do. So the animal can't replace that behavior. And for every animal that I'm told, yeah, well, he kicked, but the farrier whacked him really hard with a rasp and he hasn't kicked since, I'll give you 10 that never pick their feet up for the farrier again. So it's a very dangerous route to go down. And it's not something we recommend until an absolute last resort and everything else has been tried. So positive punishment is adding something, so a shout or a hit or something like that. And negative punishment is when we take something away. You take away attention. I'm going to give you a little tester here so that I can check you're all with me, but just to give you a chance to run this through your mental processes. So here's a little example. Write in the chat box what you think this one is. Now, all of this, of course, depends on the animal's perception, the context, the environment, previous experience. You know, I don't have enough time to set up a whole page of this is what it looks like. But in general, what would you think this handle applies gentle pressure to the lead rope, Donkey starts walking and the handler releases pressure. What have we got? Yeah, Cinder's good, Ian's good, Tuesdays are good, Sharon, yeah. Good, good, good. So we've got some negative reinforcement. We've increased the likelihood of that behavior of walking happens again. To my experience, when you're working with the science of behavior, this is the area, negative reinforcement, you're going to get most problems. This is the donkey that steps forward and you keep the pressure on because you want it to go faster. So you keep pulling and that donkey isn't getting any release of pressure. Pretty soon it learns to stop. You jerk back, you release the pressure, turn around, say what you're doing. Now the donkey's learned that stopping gets the release of pressure. You go to reach down the leg, donkey kicks. You go into the field, you creep towards the donkey moves away, so you pull back because you don't want it to move away. Now the donkey's getting, so when I move away, you move away. Great, I can do that. So we get this association. Look at your timing with your negative reinforcement. What's this one? You can stick that in the chat box. Donkey picks up the foot calmly. Handler scratches the withers. What have we got? I've made these pretty easy for you tonight. Everybody's got positive reinforcement. That's really good. Okay, fantastic. So what about this one? Donkey starts nibbling, nuzzling to try to get their medication sandwich. Handler moves away and ignores them. What's this one? Again, you can put it in the chat box. Think about, have we taken something away? Have we added something? Is the behavior going to increase or decrease? I can see by the rate that the answers are coming in, we've had to think about this one a little bit more. Good. So this is actually negative punishment. We've taken something away that the animal wanted, the medication sandwich, to decrease or stop the behavior of nuzzling or nibbling. So we've taken away something negative. We've got negative punishment. And that's why, you know, I never say never. You know, it's almost impossible not to, a donkey foal nibbling you as you scratch it. If you stop scratching it, you've taken away something it liked, which was the scratches. It puts its head out the front. You give it a scratch again. It nibbles you again. You take your hands off. Each time you take your hands off, technically, you're using negative punishment because you're taking something away. Is that going to be horrendously detrimental to that foal? Probably not, as long as you use the addition of positive reinforcement to mark the right behavior. As quickly as possible, the animal stands still, stops nuzzling, and is not nibbling you, give it the sandwich. That's what tells it. Remember, when you're setting boundaries in the science of behavior, the best way to set a boundary for an equine is to tell it what does work. You can tell it the 10,000 things that don't work, but it's the 10,001st thing that might be what you want. It is much easier to set boundaries by going, yes, that works. That's what I wanted. Standing still and calmly, standing patiently, walking alongside me, whatever it is. Saying yes to the animal is the most effective way in terms of behavior to tell them what the rules are, what the boundaries are. So number 4, no guesses really needed here. Donkey starts nibbling and nuzzling and try to get the medication sandwich. This time the handler is going to push the donkey's head away and shouts no. We've added the push, we've added the shout, so we must be using positive punishment. Again, don't think of it as good or bad punishment. We're just thinking about addition. We've added something and we're using punishment. And they all have slightly different effects. Use video. Watch what you're doing. Look back on the video, get someone to spot and watch for you if necessary. And then you can just check what the animal's perception is. Is the behavior reoccurring? When the behavior is happening and keeps happening, have a look to see whether you're reinforcing what you think you're reinforcing. He won't stop nuzzling me. He won't stop nibbling me. Well, am I putting my hand on and pushing his head away? Then that might be the reason it hasn't stopped. You won't walk any faster. Is my timing right? Am I releasing the pressure when he just walks that little bit quicker, or am I pulling because I want even faster? Because if the pressure's not coming off, he's just going to stop. So he walks slowly. It's that classic thing where you get a riding school pony and they're being kicked in the sides by the youngster who doesn't know any better. And no matter how fast the pony goes, they're still being kicked in the sides. Pretty soon the pony goes, I'll just go slow and be kicked, because there's no point running fast and be kicked, because the thing is the same. So always be thinking and looking at these quadrants of reinforcement, really important. Does that make any sense to anybody? I'm going to give you 60 seconds just to recap. Get any questions in there if you need to before we go on to the next couple of steps. Anything anybody need to say? Are you still with me? And is that all understandable? Good, you're still here. Great. Okay, we've got some positive stuff. Those of you who've got anything negative are being really quiet, so I'll take that as a positive. Fantastic. Okay. I hope you're also thinking about your situations, the problem behaviors you mentioned at the start of the webinar. How does this apply? Is it possibly a timing issue? Are you reinforcing the wrong behaviors? Those sorts of things. Okay, so what else have we got then? Let's have a look at this next steps that are really important. Let me just hold in. Annette is asking, I've been training a donkey who's having feet done using positive reinforcement, but when he kicked on one leg, is out him back in the stable. Now, you might need just to clear that up. Do you mean that he is, so he kicks out and he ends up being put back in the stable? Because, you know, you have to look at that. Could that be punishment? It could be. You're taking away the opportunity to gain food rewards, which he may well have been enjoying. So you're trying to punish him. I would suspect that would be negative. It would be a negative punishment. Would it be effective? Probably not, because if the animal is kicking out because he wants you to leave, you've technically just rewarded him by putting him back in the stable and you're not touching his feet. You know, if we were using true positive reinforcement in that animal that was kicking out, what we would do is make our steps smaller. We'd reinforce positively the easier steps. We'd make sure we weren't going to the problem to solve the problem. We'd shape the behavior more effectively rather than trying to introduce some form of punishment to tell him that kicking out was the wrong thing to do. He's communicating after all, and it's important to listen to that communication. Go back to the tip number one, shut up and listen. If he's telling you, if he's kicking out, then he's telling you we're taking too big a steps, or we're overreaching, or we haven't put enough small steps in. And that really brings us to this one, which is do the one thing that makes training easy, which is to shape behavior. Like you haven't heard me say this before, it's so fundamentally important. Okay, so shaping is simply this taking you from where you are now to your goal. Yippee, I'm very happy about that. It's these steps, think of them as steps, and it's the process of breaking down the required behavior or goal into small manageable steps. It's called successive approximation because we approximate the final goal in small manageable chunks. What I see in the big wide world is people are taking these really big steps, and those really big steps don't really seem very big. The clearest example I can give you, and it comes back to that anxiety question right at the start, is that someone will say, my donkey's suffering a little bit of separation distress, and I want to just, you know, separate them for a little bit. I'm just going to separate them for 5 minutes and see how they get on. Now, 5 minutes doesn't seem like a very big step or very long, unless you're the one with separation distress, in which case it is an incredibly long time. The correct step would be something like, can I just separate you by a couple of meters in full sight, and see that you're comfortable with that before I move on to any other step. And so these big steps are common mistakes. People think they're making small steps, but they're really making very big steps, which cause problems, which are all linked. These 6 things that I'm talking to you about here, they're all interlinked, as you'll begin to see. So we have a written shaping plan. Written shaping plan, these are the steps. Now, how big are these steps that we're talking about? We're talking about steps that are written down as pick up the step. Let's use feet picking up because Annette mentioned it. So feet picking up, the steps might be something along the lines of, once you've broken the animal's body down into small steps, you're literally touching the foot. Now, most people will go for, I'm touching the foot, now let me pick it up. That's too big a step. Can I get the animal just to tip his foot onto the toe? Before that, can I get the animal just to shift the weight onto the 3 other feet and take the weight off 1 foot? Really important. Before you ever try to get him to tip the foot, before you get to move the foot around on the ground without it leaving the ground, pick it up, put it to somewhere else, move it around all the time. There's 5 steps in there where someone else may have just put in, touch the hoof, pick it up for 1 second. And then the step is pick it up for a second, put it straight down, pick it up for 2 seconds, pick it up for 5 seconds, and we begin to build on that. Within our written steps, there are even smaller steps, and these are the ones that you're using in your individual program that you're training. People say, oh, shaping plan, written down, it's too regimented. It doesn't have to be. It's a balance of art and science. So you have your written plan that tells you where you're going. This helps you stay in the moment so you know what to focus on. You're not thinking about what am I going to do next. You're thinking about where am I now, because you know what the written steps are. Then you come to your individual action. So when you've got that donkey and you're going to be picking up its foot, you have to feel, you have to know how long I can move it. How can I move it? Just going from 2 seconds to 5 seconds might require me to do a 3-second step, a 4-second step, and a 5-second step. And in theory, I could write those all down, but that would be ridiculous even for me. So within that, I've got 2 seconds, and now I'm going to work to 5. In my training session, I might go up and down that 3-second, 4-second steps before I get to 5 seconds. So there are some individual, I'm trying to get over an obstacle on the ground. I might walk around it. I might walk next to it. I might stand next to it. I might do all of these things before I go across it. So these individual actions, really important within your training session. They're very flexible. Having a shaping plan is not something set in stone. You can change it. You can learn from it. And it gives you clarity. It makes you consistent. It makes sure you don't miss out any steps. It is such a powerful tool that my top tip number 2 is to get a written shaping plan. My experience around the world is people tell me, Ben, I've got one, it's in my head. And I'm going to say, but look, you might be working with 4 different shaping plans, and these are actual numbers off some of my shaping plans. 88 steps, 115, I think this is feet, 105 might be leading, 120 is probably clipping, I think. And you're going to keep all these 4 plans with all of these steps in the correct order in your head. Wow, that's amazing. To me, how can you be in the moment with your animal when you're keeping all that stuff stored in your head? How can you have clarity and consistency and direction? Get it written down. If you were a dolphin trainer, if you were a dog trainer, a behaviorist, you would have it written down because it makes sense to do that. It sounds like it's a million miles from training your donkey. I want to just train my donkey. You want clarity, you want connection, you want to be able to work with science behavior, get a written shaping plan. Really powerful tool. Step number 4. Okay, this is interesting for me. So this is the one that is the most common mistake in training. It is overreaching the comfort zones. The animal goes here. Your animal could be in this small step, or it could be out here. These concentric rings kind of represent the shaping plan, the animal's comfort zones, your comfort zones. And what tends to happen is that you want to work to the inside of these black lines. If you imagine that this is the moment where the animal goes, oh, I'm a bit worried, not quite sure. That's the edge of your comfort zone. That's what you work through. Don't work through that and then see the animal kick out. Don't work until the point where the animal runs off. Don't work until where he bites. Don't work until he pulls back. All of those things, so you've gone past the comfort zone. You've then engaged the flight mechanism. Then you have to calm them down. Then he's learned the wrong behaviors, and now you've got to undo that behavior. This is why, if you combine this with your shaping plan, it makes training faster. Smaller steps actually make training more efficient. It's not about faster, it's about efficiency. I don't have to unlearn bad stuff because I've just overreached the comfort zone. Let me try and give you an example. I've never done this on a webinar before. I've done it in a live course. Balloons. Balloons are a great example of this. I hope you've all got your microphones still on. I'm going to blow up this balloon as big as I can. Now, on a normal course, I'd get you to do this, but I didn't have you all bring balloons to it. I don't know if any of you are a bit worried about the sound if it pops in the microphone. Any of you are kind of pulling a few faces. I can't see that. You'll have to tell me if you are. I'm trying to blow it up as big as I can without popping it. Anybody nervous? Okay, I'm going to stop there. Now, here's my question. If I blew up this balloon and it popped, I want you to tell me in the chat box, how easy would it be to blow up the balloon a second time? If I blew it up and it popped, how easy would it be to blow it up the second time? You tell me. Not easy? Yeah? Not very easy, not very? Cool. Okay, now, impossible. Yeah, if I pop this, you know, some of you might be sitting there thinking, I don't want the big bang. That's the edge of your comfort zone. The point I'm trying to get to is people are often more worried about popping a balloon than they are overreaching an animal's comfort zone. If I'd blown this up and popped it, I can't blow it up again. I mean, technically I could get a lot of sellotape and meld it together, but who'd want to? And it's the same for the animal. If I burst the animal's comfort zone, you're then expecting him to work with me again. I've pushed him too far. How do I then say, oh, I didn't mean to do that, it's okay? It's like me throwing the spider in your face in week 3 because I got bored and I couldn't wait for you to get faster. Going to work with me tomorrow? Going to trust me tomorrow? This is so crucial. You know, that I got feedback from the balloon. I could tell how hard it was to blow it up because of the pressure on my lungs. I could feel here, this is all feedback. This is the edge of the comfort zone. I'm getting that sense, and that's what you're getting from your donkey. How much tension in the muscle? Is he just twitching that a little bit? You have to feel that. That's enough. I'm going to stop early. Could I get this bigger? Possibly. Maybe it could go much bigger. I don't know. But the point is, if I don't pop it because I stop early, I get to come back and carry on working. And it's really important that you have the same option with your animals. That's why stretching the comfort zones. People overreach comfort zones. They burst the animals' comfort zones. They don't want to work with them again. That is the biggest mistake that I see in training. Alongside people trying to go from the middle here right to the outside in one easy step. That's called flooding. I just want to mention we should avoid flooding. This is where you expose the animal to the feared stimulus. It's flooded with fear and anxiety. So you don't want to go in the trailer. I'm going to walk you in and out of the trailer. Don't want to pick up your foot. I'm going to hold onto your foot and I'm going to hold on until you stop kicking. That is flooding. Okay, it has a lot of problems. If the animal escapes during that process, it's going to be much worse. It's really difficult. Does it work? Technically, scientifically, yes. Do you want to do it? No. I would strongly advise you never to do flooding. It is dangerous. You can be injured. The animal can be injured. It can go wrong, and you can make the behavior a lot worse. Doesn't mean to say that it doesn't sometimes work, but I really wouldn't advise it for anybody other than a real professional in the last resort of what you might be doing. Be very aware of this, and professionals or people who are telling you to do this. There is a lot of danger in flooding. What's our antidote to it? Just ask, you know, just because we can, should we? Just because we can hold on to the leg, should we? Just because we can make him go on the trailer with a pressure halter or something, should we? Always have that question in your mind. Just because we can, should we? It's far better to wait. Break it down into small steps. Stretch the animal's comfort zone. Use systematic desensitization, which is the slow stretching of the animal's comfort zones with periods of calm. Use positive reinforcement. That is much safer, much better learning, much more long-term relationship building. Step 5, develop problem-solving, trust, and confidence. What I'm going to say here is most people hope they're going to get these things, but deliberately set out on a shaping plan that has these things involved. If you can build this deliberately, it is much safer. If you want to take your donkey for a walk, this is the place to start. Maybe not with the bunting that low. Start with it 20 feet high and gradually drop it lower. Start with a lead rope on the ground, and then a pole, and then 2 poles, and then a bit of tarpaulin in 30 centimeters. Remember, we're shaping. We're stretching the animal's comfort zone. We're deliberately letting the animal learn. Not so I can make him do this, but he can learn how to do this. Okay, because we can begin to let this animal figure out how to solve the problems we face. If you get your donkey and you want to go for a walk, don't go out for a walk until you've done this work. because it's really important that the animal learns how to solve problems with you. And in doing this work, it begins to love you. There's the same animals, and they're doing all this work. And here's Tiny Tim at the Devon County show, and bunting and everything's going on because we've done the work that's involved. We've hung up balloons, which you can see. We've done all this. He knows how to deal with these things. Really important. Get your shaping plan in place for that, and do it deliberately. Not just, well, if we do enough work, if we go for a walk and nothing bad happens, we'll develop the trust and it'll be fine, because that often doesn't work. Scientifically have a plan, and this is about resilience. So when your animal is taking a day to recover from a bad experience, that's because we haven't done enough of this deliberately working on problem solving, trust and confidence. Step 6, final step. Enjoy the journey. This is one for humans. It's about measuring grit. It's a scientific step. We can measure grit. How are you going to stick at something? Are you going to give up early? Are you going to walk away when it gets difficult? Your journey will be full of highs and lows. It's how you deal with the lows. Can you learn from them? Can you look at them and go, you know what, that was tough, but I made a mistake and I figured that out, and now I'm going to do this differently next time. How are you going to set your boundaries? How are you going to have your principles set up? Enjoying the journey allows you to do the other 5 steps that we've just talked about, because you're not going to be a perfect trainer. None of us are. So the Science of Behaviour, and you can go look up the study of grit and stickability, and you'll see that what grit really means and how we can stick at it. It's a really proven way of improving your performance. So enjoy the journey. It's easy to say, but just look at it all as learning, as an opportunity to grow and to build a relationship. Your relationship with your animal comes from the things that you do together, and that's about enjoying the journey. So I'm appreciative of the time. Quick recap: eliminate pain and medical conditions. Make sure freedom, friends, forage. This is your environmental elements. Make sure those are in. You've got enough freedom from that animal to move, that he's got social interaction, that they've got the right diet, mental stimulation. Really important. ABCs. That's your antecedents, what goes on before the behavior, and then the consequences. I think that is in the foot webinar. Go in there maybe and have a look. We talked about it a lot in that situation. Don't forget your timing, and don't go to the problem to fix the problem. And there are the 6 steps that we've looked at, that we want to work with the true nature of the animal, our positive reinforcement, our negative reinforcement, getting our timing right, shaping our behavior, and get a shaping plan. You know, I can't tell you how powerful that is for people. Stretch your comfort zones. Don't pop your balloons. You know, I don't know why we've got that twice. Final tasks. How would you overcome that I don't have enough time? What would be your answer to someone saying I don't have enough time? What would be your own answer to yourself? Can you make yourself a list of 4 things that you will do differently as a result of today's learning? You don't have to put them in the chat box, but I would suggest you need to write them down so you take something away. If you want to write them in the chat box, please do. Love it. Love it. And I think, yeah, prioritize Paula. That would be getting away over time. Smaller steps, shaping behavior. You know, what's a priority for you? How much time do you want to put into this? Slow the training down. That will certainly, you know, enjoy the journey. If you're enjoying the journey, funny enough, you prioritize the work, and you've got time to do it. Good. Yeah. Take smaller steps. If you've only got 5 minutes, then just do a small step. Don't over and burst that balloon. You know, it's the 5 and 20 rule. People get something good in 5 minutes. They try again. They do a little bit more. Then it goes wrong. And then they spend 20 minutes getting back to where they were in the first 5 minutes. And that's an issue. So make sure is that you get something good. If you don't have time, stop. Have a tea break. If you want to come back and do another 5 minutes, great, do it. If you don't have time in your day because you've got other things, walk away. 3 things you need to improve learning these principles. Think about your own skills, what you need to learn. Are there 3 things that you could do? Could I learn more about my timing? Could I get more video of myself? Could I get a shaping plan? What 3 things could improve those are the sort of things I want you to take away. Very practical steps for you to do. If you've got a problem with the vet, if you want to learn more about this, here's a resource. You can see the link up the top there. This is something I made out of a scientific paper here with Robin Foster, Dr. Foster's permission, and it's about implementing the principles of learning equine behavior. Let me just see if you've got that. Hang on, can I? just share it with you here. Let's see if it'll do this for me. You can see this is a document I've created. It's a scientific paper. We put a bit of video in there. We've got anxiety circles and behavior modification. We've got all of these sorts of things. I'll click and I'll put this in your chat box in a second. We've got 10 different aspects. Habituation. This is specifically aimed at the veterinary interventions, but you could apply it to anything you do. There you'll see your quadrants and you avoid the flooding. Reinforce desired behavior. So you're becoming familiar. Avoid punishment. It will give you a greater detail on all of these things. It's a really good document. Let me put that in the chat box for you. And fantastic. Okay, let's have your thoughts, your questions. Let me have a look here and just check out some of these. Let go of expectations. I like that, Samantha. I've been shaping plan for a donkey who doesn't like having his hooves picked out. Initially, he didn't like having his leg picked up at all, but progress has been made and he's now comfortable with the grooms picking up his hooves. However, he really doesn't cope well with the farrier and panics. I think it's the tools. Any suggestions? Yes, lots of suggestions. Think about how you can break that down into smaller things. So one of the things that I've noticed is a particular feed company, can't tell you which one, but they have a plastic steering stick. It's got a round handle on the end. It looks just like a rasp. Okay, use it to stir up food. But if you get one of those, that's a rasp, but it doesn't make noise, and you can begin to introduce tools into that situation. So secondly, you can drop things while you're doing stuff. You know, watch your farrier. Get a video of your farrier if you can, doing an animal that likes being done, and watch what they do. How do they hold the foot? What position do they put it in? How long do they hold it? How high do they hold it? Farrier I work with, he doesn't know this, I don't think, but he taps the ground with his rasp before he actually starts rasping the feet. And that's because he's just making sure the handle of his rasp is tight. And it's a subconscious behavior, I'm pretty sure now. So when I'm training donkeys, I tap the floor so that they get used to that coming, so that he can hear it. You know, you have to be that farrier in every dimension. You have to add in smell, you know, so get the farrier to wear something that you can then wear or put out with the donkeys having feeds. Get the farrier to wear an overcoat that you can then wear when you're doing your training, so you can introduce smell into it. Shape the behavior. That's the second part of the shaping plan, and it's really in the shaping plan to build that up. But just use your imagination to break down the small things, which is cool. I hope that helps, Karen. If it doesn't, and you don't run out of ideas, and get in touch. Yeah, be prepared to be patient, get to know your donkey. It's about the relationship. All of this is about relationship. It's the art and science of behavior. The science will tell you all the stuff I've been telling you tonight, but the art is about building relationship. It's about knowing when to put the foot down, when to ask. Build the relationship first by using the science of behavior before you try and fix the problem. Christine, in terms of behavior and learning, how do you see mules in relation to donkeys and horses? I can't articulate that. I think I probably answered that as we went on, Christine, about we're working at the mule standard and we're trying to train to that high level. If you can train a mule, you can train about anything, just about anything. You can tell a horse what to do, ask a donkey, negotiate with a mule. We should be negotiating with all three. Good. Have we got all? Here's a great question from Tuesday, which is how soon should you start a shaping plan on a donkey that has just been moved? Yeah, I guess the answer's probably over a course of a couple of weeks to let it set in, but almost on day one. If you're shaping behavior really well, you're making small steps, you're taking your time, you can do small steps right from the start. It may not be in a formal training session because you want that donkey to know you, but actually doing some work together is part of the way of getting the donkey to do things with you. And if the steps are small enough and the shaping plan is written well enough, then there's no reason not to start pretty soon, really. Just you know, if it's a foot shaping plan, you know, obviously we're just starting with stroking the donkey's body. That's part of the shaping plan. So you can start earlier than you generally think.